the moment Whitney Harper declared she didn't date rich guys. The man sitting 3 stools down at Murphy's bar found himself inexplicably intrigued, though she had no idea he was listening, or that his bank account had more zeros than most people would see in 10 lifetimes. Whitney was halfway through her second beer, gesturing emphatically at her best friend Sarah, who had apparently suggested setting her up with some hedge fund manager. "Absolutely not," Whitney said firmly, tucking a strand of her honey blonde hair behind her ear. "I'm serious, Sarah. I don't do rich guys, they're all the same. They think money can buy everything, including people's time and affection. I want someone real, someone who understands what it's like to work for a living." Sarah rolled her eyes. "You're being ridiculous. Not all wealthy men are jerks." "Maybe not all of them, but enough that I'd rather not take my chances." Whitney took another sip of her beer. "Besides, I'm perfectly happy with my life the way it is. I love my job at the animal shelter, I have great friends, and I don't need some pompous rich guy telling me I should want more." 3 stools away, Knox Daniels kept his eyes on his whiskey, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He wore a simple navy Henley and jeans, his dark hair slightly mussed from running his hands through it after a particularly long day. Nothing about his appearance screamed billionaire, which was exactly how he preferred it when he wanted an evening of anonymity. He had walked into Murphy's because it was unpretentious and dive bar enough that no one would recognize him as the CEO of Daniels Global Manufacturing, a company that produced specialized equipment for hospitals and medical facilities worldwide. Whitney's voice carried clearly in the half-empty bar. "The last rich guy I dated, remember him? Marcus with his fancy car and his country club membership. He literally tried to buy me a new wardrobe because he said my clothes weren't appropriate for his social circle." "Okay, Marcus was definitely a tool," Sarah conceded. "Exactly. And before him was that investment banker who couldn't go 5 minutes without checking his portfolio. I'm done. Give me a normal guy with a normal job who treats me like an actual person, not an accessory." Knox found himself oddly stung by her words, even though he knew she wasn't talking to him or about him specifically. Still, he had been on the receiving end of enough gold diggers and social climbers to understand the frustration from the other side. Women who only saw dollar signs, who faked interest in his life and work just to get access to his wealth. It was exhausting and isolating in ways he rarely admitted to anyone. The bartender, an older man named Joe who had owned Murphy's for 30 years, caught Knox's eye and raised an eyebrow. Knox had been coming here for months now, always on nights when he needed to decompress from the pressure of running a multi-billion-dollar company. Joe knew exactly who he was, but had never told a soul, and Knox appreciated that discretion more than the man probably realized. Whitney's phone buzzed on the bar and she glanced at it before sighing. "It's the shelter. They need me to come in early tomorrow. We have a new intake, a dog that was found abandoned on the highway." "You work too much," Sarah said, though her tone was affectionate. "Says the woman who put in 70 hours last week at the hospital." Whitney grinned at her friend. Sarah was an ER nurse, and the 2 women had been inseparable since college. "That's different. I get paid overtime. I get paid in puppy kisses and the knowledge that I'm making a difference." Whitney's expression softened. "Besides, you know I can't resist helping an animal in need. That's why I became a veterinary technician in the first place." Knox admired the genuine warmth in her voice when she talked about her work. He understood that feeling, the drive to do something meaningful. Despite what people might think, he hadn't built his company purely for profit. His mother had died from a preventable medical error when he was 19, a mistake that happened because the hospital's equipment had malfunctioned and there was no backup available. He had vowed to ensure that never happened to another family if he could help it, and Daniels Global Manufacturing now produced some of the most reliable, innovative medical equipment in the world, Sarah finished her wine and checked her own phone. I hate to bail, but I really should get home. Early shift tomorrow. Go, go. I'll finish my beer and head out too. Whitney hugged her friend goodbye and watched her leave before turning back to her drink. She pulled out her own phone and started scrolling, her brow furrowed slightly in concentration. Knox debated with himself for a moment. He could finish his whiskey and leave without saying a word. That would be the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But something about Whitney Harper intrigued him, and it had been a long time since he had felt genuinely curious about another person. He stood up, carrying his glass, and walked over to the empty stool beside her. "Is this seat taken?" Whitney looked up, and Knox felt something shift in his chest when her hazel eyes met his. She was pretty in an understated way, with a smattering of freckles across her nose and an openness to her expression that suggested she hadn't yet learned to guard herself against the world. "It's all yours," she said, gesturing to the stool. "Thanks." Knox settled in, very aware that he was taking a risk. If she found out who he was, given what he had just overheard, she would probably throw her beer in his face. "I'm Knox. Whitney." She offered him a friendly smile. "Haven't seen you here before. I come in occasionally." Usually later in the evening. That was true enough. "You're a regular," depends on your definition of regular. "Sarah and I meet up here once or twice a month. It's our decompression spot after tough weeks." Whitney took a sip of her beer. "What do you do, Knox?" Here was the moment of truth. Knox could tell her exactly who he was, watch her expression change, and prove her prejudices right. Or he could hedge, give her a version of the truth that wouldn't immediately set off alarm bells. "I work in manufacturing. Medical equipment, mostly. What about you?" "I'm a vet tech at the Harbor View Animal Shelter." Her whole face lit up when she said it. "It's not glamorous or high-paying, but I love it. Every day I get to help animals who really need it." "That sounds rewarding," Knox said, and he meant it. "What got you into that line of work?" Whitney launched into a story about the stray dog she had found as a kid, how her parents had let her keep it, and how caring for that dog had sparked a lifelong passion for animal welfare. Knox found himself genuinely engaged, asking questions, laughing at her anecdotes about particularly stubborn cats or dogs with hilarious personalities. They talked for over an hour, the conversation flowing easily from topic to topic. Whitney told him about growing up in a small town outside the city, about her parents who still lived there and ran a hardware store. Knox shared carefully edited stories about his own childhood, about his mother's death and how it had shaped his path, though he left out the parts about building a billion-dollar empire afterward. "I'm sorry about your mom," Whitney said softly when he finished telling her about that painful loss. "That must have been incredibly hard." "It was, but it also gave me purpose, made me want to do something that mattered." Knox met her eyes. "Sounds like you understand that feeling." "I do," Whitney smiled. "It's rare to meet someone who gets it. Most people think I'm crazy for working at a shelter when I could make twice as much at a private veterinary clinic." "You're not crazy. You're passionate. There's a difference." The bar was starting to empty out and Joe called last call. Whitney glanced at her watch in surprise. "Wow, I didn't realize how late it was. I should probably head home." Knox felt an unexpected disappointment. He wasn't ready for the evening to end, which was unusual for him. "Can I walk you to your car?" "That's sweet, but I actually live close enough to walk. Just a few blocks." Whitney hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "Would you maybe want to get coffee sometime? I've really enjoyed talking to you." Relief and something warmer flooded through Knox. "I'd like that a lot." He pulled out his own phone and they exchanged numbers. His phone was an older model, nothing fancy, which he kept specifically for moments like this when he didn't want to draw attention to himself. They walked out of Murphy's together, and Knox insisted on at least walking her partway home despite her protests that she was perfectly safe. The night air was cool and Whitney pulled her cardigan tighter around herself. "So, manufacturing," she said as they walked. "That must be interesting. What exactly do you do there?" "Project management, mostly," Knox said, which was technically true. He managed a lot of projects just from the CEO's office, making sure everything runs smoothly, that we're meeting our clients' needs. "Do you like it?" Knox considered the question. "I do, actually. It's challenging, and there are days when I want to tear my hair out, but knowing that the work we do helps people, it makes it worthwhile." They reached the corner where Whitney needed to turn toward her apartment. She stopped and turned to face him, and in the glow of the streetlight, Knox could see the genuine warmth in her expression. "Thank you for tonight," she said. "I came to the bar stressed about work and life in general, and I'm leaving feeling better. That's not nothing." "Thank you," Knox countered. "I came in needing to decompress from a brutal week, and talking to you was the best part of it." Whitney bit her lip, looking suddenly shy. "I'm really glad you came over to talk to me." "Me too." Knox wanted to kiss her, but it felt too soon, too presumptuous. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently. "Text me when you get home safe." "I'm literally 2 blocks away," she said with a laugh, but she nodded. "But yes, I will." Knox watched her walk away, waiting until she turned the corner before heading back toward where he had parked his car several blocks in the other direction. He had deliberately parked far from the bar, another precaution to maintain his anonymity. The car itself was nice but not ostentatious, a Lexus rather than the Bentley or Ferrari that sat in his garage at home. As he drove back to his penthouse downtown, Knox replayed the evening in his mind. Whitney was different from any woman he had met in years. She was genuine, passionate about her work, and had a warmth that drew him in. But he also knew he was starting this potential relationship on shaky ground. He hadn't lied to her, not exactly, but he had certainly omitted some pretty significant truths. His phone buzzed as he pulled into his building's underground parking garage. A text from an unknown number that must be Whitney. "Made it home safe. Thanks again for a great evening. Looking forward to that coffee." Knox smiled as he responded. "Sleep well, Whitney. I'll text you tomorrow about coffee." He rode the elevator up to his penthouse, letting himself into the sprawling space that suddenly felt too empty, too sterile compared to the warmth of Murphy's bar and Whitney's company. His assistant had left some documents on the kitchen counter for him to review, reminders of the business dinner he had tomorrow night with potential investors from Japan, the board meeting on Thursday, the charity gala on Saturday. Knox poured himself a glass of water and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. He knew he needed to tell Whitney the truth about who he was, and soon. The longer he waited, the worse it would be. But he also wanted a chance to know her without the weight of his wealth and status coloring every interaction. Was that so wrong? His phone buzzed again, but this time it was his younger sister, Kira. "Heard you skipped the family dinner tonight. Dad's annoyed." Knox sighed. He had forgotten about the monthly Daniels family obligation, too caught up in wanting to escape to Murphy's. He called Kira back, and she answered on the first ring. "You're in trouble," she said cheerfully. "Dad made that face, you know the one. I'll apologize tomorrow. Something came up." Knox loosened his collar, suddenly feeling tired. Something or someone. Kira had always been perceptive. "You sound different." "I met someone tonight, a woman at the bar." "Oh, this should be good. Let me guess, another socialite who laughed too loud at your jokes and asked about your car." "Actually, no. She's a vet tech at an animal shelter and she has no idea who I am." Knox paused. "She actually told her friend earlier that she doesn't date rich guys." Kira whistled. "Wow, so what are you going to do?" "I'm going to take her for coffee and get to know her. And then I'm going to tell her the truth and hope she doesn't hate me for it." "Knox, you know this could blow up in your face, right? The longer you wait, the more it looks like you were deliberately deceiving her." "I know." Knox rubbed his eyes. "But Kira, Talking to her tonight, it was the first time in months I felt like a normal person. Not the CEO, not the billionaire, just a guy having a conversation with an interesting woman. I want a little more of that before it all gets complicated. I get it, Kira said softly. I really do. Just be careful, okay, and tell her soon. She deserves to know. After he hung up, Knox got ready for bed, but sleep eluded him. He kept thinking about Whitney's laugh, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about the animals she worked with, the casual confidence she had in who she was and what she wanted from life. She wasn't trying to be anyone other than herself, and that authenticity was magnetic. The next morning, Knox was up early for a breakfast meeting with his CFO. They discussed quarterly projections and potential expansion into new markets, but Knox found his mind wandering. Finally, Marcus, his CFO, who was definitely not the same Marcus Whitney had dated, called him on it. "You're distracted today. Everything okay?" Knox shook his head. "Sorry, just have a lot on my mind. Anything I can help with, not unless you're an expert in relationships," Knox said wryly. Marcus laughed. "Definitely not my area of expertise. But I will say, in the 10 years I've worked with you, I've never seen you this thrown off by anything. Whoever she is, she must be special." After the meeting, Knox sent Whitney a text. "Good morning. How's your day going?" Her response came 20 minutes later, covered in dog hair and loving it. "We got the new intake settled and he's the sweetest thing despite what he's been through. How's your day? Long meetings, but thinking about coffee with you is keeping me going. Are you free tomorrow afternoon?" "I can be. I get off at 3. "Perfect. There's a coffee shop called Brood Awakening on 5th Street. Meet you there at 3:30. It's a date." "Well, not a date unless you want it to be. Sorry, that was awkward. I'm going to stop typing now." Knox grinned at his phone. "It's definitely a date. See you tomorrow, Whitney." The rest of his day passed in a blur of meetings and decisions that needed his input. He approved a new manufacturing facility in Ohio, reviewed marketing materials for a new product line, and dealt with a minor crisis when a shipment to a hospital in Boston was delayed. But through it all, part of his mind was on Whitney and their upcoming coffee date. That evening, he called his best friend, Lucas, who ran a successful restaurant chain and was one of the few people who knew Knox well enough to give him honest advice. "Let me get this straight," Lucas said after Knox filled him in. "You met a woman who specifically said she doesn't date rich guys, and instead of being upfront about who you are, you're going on a coffee date with her while she thinks you're just some guy who works in manufacturing. When you put it like that, it sounds bad. That's because it is bad, man. Look, I get why you did it. I really do. But you need to tell her the truth before this goes any further. If she finds out from someone else or figures it out on her own, she's going to feel betrayed, and rightfully so. I know, I'm going to tell her soon." Define soon. Knox sighed. "After we have coffee, I just want one normal date with her first. One afternoon where we're just Knox and Whitney, two people getting to know each other. And if she sees through you, if she recognizes you from a magazine or a news article, then I'll deal with it. But Lucas, she's different. She's real in a way I haven't encountered in a long time. I just want a chance." Lucas was quiet for a moment. "Okay, I hear you, but Knox, promise me that after this coffee date you'll tell her everything. Don't string her along. She sounds like a good person, and good people deserve honesty." "I promise." The next day dragged interminably. Knox had trouble focusing during his morning meetings, and his assistant, Patricia, who had worked with him for 8 years, definitely noticed. "Sir, you've checked your watch 5 times in the last 10 minutes, she said during a brief break between calls. "Is there somewhere you need to be?" "I have a personal appointment at 3:30, Knox admitted. "Can you make sure nothing runs over?" Patricia's eyebrows rose slightly. In all the years she had worked for him, Knox had never prioritized a personal appointment over work. "Of course, sir. I'll keep things on schedule." At 3:15, Knox left the office, ignoring the surprised looks from his senior management team. He had changed from his usual tailored suit into jeans and a button-down shirt, wanting to maintain the casual appearance he had presented at Murphy's bar. He arrived at Brood Awakening 10 minutes early and chose a table near the window. The coffee shop was cozy, with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. It was exactly the kind of place he imagined Whitney would love. She arrived right at 3:30, slightly breathless, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She wore scrubs with cartoon dogs printed on them, and there was indeed dog hair clinging to her shoulder. She looked beautiful. "Sorry, I came straight from work," she said as she slid into the chair across from him. "I should have gone home and changed." "You look perfect," Knox said honestly. "Tell me about the new dog. The one from yesterday." Whitney's face lit up as she launched into the story, and Knox listened, genuinely interested, as she described the older golden retriever they had named Chance. "He's going to need some medical care and it's expensive, but we're going to figure it out. We always do." They ordered coffee and pastries, and the conversation flowed as easily as it had at the bar. Whitney told him more about her work, about the challenges of running a shelter on a limited budget, about her dreams of someday opening a sanctuary for special needs animals. Knox found himself sharing more of his real self, talking about the satisfaction he got from solving complex problems, from building something that lasted. "You're really passionate about your work," Whitney observed. "I like that. Too many people just go through the motions, collecting a paycheck without caring about what they do." "Says the woman who literally gets paid in puppy kisses," Knox teased. "Hey, those puppy kisses are worth more than money," Whitney protested, but she was laughing. "Okay, I do also get paid actual money, just not very much of it." "Does that bother you, the money part, I mean?" Whitney considered the question thoughtfully. "Sometimes. I mean, I'd be lying if I said I didn't worry about bills or wish I could afford a nicer apartment. But I genuinely love what I do, and I can't imagine trading that for a job I hated just because it paid better. Life's too short to be miserable, you know?" Knox did know. He thought about the years he had spent building his company, the 80-hour weeks, the constant pressure. He loved his work, but there were definitely days when he questioned whether the success was worth the sacrifice. "Can I ask you something?" Knox said. "At the bar the other night, you were pretty adamant about not dating wealthy guys. What happened to make you feel that way?" Whitney grimaced. "You heard that, huh? I was kind of loud. The bar wasn't that crowded, I couldn't help overhearing." She played with her coffee cup, looking embarrassed. "I dated a couple of guys who had money, and both times it was a disaster. They treated me like I was some kind of project, something they could mold into the perfect girlfriend for their lifestyle. One of them actually tried to buy me a whole new wardrobe because he thought my clothes were too casual. The other one got angry when I wouldn't quit my job at the shelter to be available whenever he wanted to go on some last-minute trip." "They sound like jerks," Knox said quietly. "They were. And I know it's not fair to paint all wealthy men with the same brush, but I just got tired of it. I want someone who likes me for who I am, not who they think I should be. Someone who understands that I'm not interested in fancy parties or expensive restaurants. I'm happy with places like this." She gestured around the coffee shop. "Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Knox said, even as his heart sank a little. He was planning a charity gala on Saturday that would have 500 guests and a 7-figure catering bill. That was his world, the world he needed to tell her about. But how could he, when she had just articulated exactly why she wanted nothing to do with it? They talked for 2 more hours, until the coffee shop staff started giving them pointed looks about needing to close up. Knox walked Whitney to her car, an older Honda Civic that had definitely seen better days. "This was really nice," Whitney said, turning to face him. "I'd like to do it again if you would, definitely." Knox reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the gesture feeling natural and right. "Whitney, I need to tell you something." She looked up at him, her expression open and trusting, and Knox felt like the worst kind of coward. But he had promised Lucas he would tell her the truth after the coffee date. "What is it?" she asked. Before he could answer, Whitney's phone started ringing. She glanced at it and her expression shifted to concern. "It's the shelter. I'm so sorry, I need to take this." Knox nodded and Whitney answered the call. He watched her face cycle through several emotions before she hung up. "I have to go," she said urgently. "There's been an emergency. One of our dogs is having complications from surgery. I'm sorry, Knox." "Don't apologize. Go, the dog needs you." Knox squeezed her hand. "Text me later and let me know how it goes." "I will." "And Knox, whatever you wanted to tell me, we can talk about it next time, okay?" She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek quickly before rushing to her car. Knox stood in the parking lot, watching her drive away, feeling like he had just dodged a bullet and dug himself deeper into a hole at the same time. He pulled out his phone and called Lucas. "I was supposed to tell her," Knox said when Lucas answered. "I was about to tell her and then she got an emergency call." "Knox, you need to stop making excuses. Just tell her. Rip the Band-Aid off." "I will. Next time I see her, I'll tell her everything." But when Whitney texted him later that evening with an update on the dog, which thankfully pulled through, their conversation naturally evolved into making plans for dinner the following weekend. And Knox found himself agreeing without bringing up the subject of his wealth and position. Over the next week, Knox and Whitney texted constantly. She sent him photos of dogs at the shelter, funny anecdotes about her coworkers, random thoughts that popped into her head. He sent her good morning texts, asked about her day, shared carefully edited stories about work challenges. They were building something real, and Knox knew with increasing certainty that he was falling for her. But he still hadn't told her the truth, and the weight of that omission grew heavier each day. On Thursday, Knox attended his board meeting, fielding questions about expansion plans and profit margins. His mind kept drifting to Whitney, to the dinner they had planned for Saturday evening. He had made reservations at a small Italian restaurant in Whitney's neighborhood, the kind of family-owned place that would fit her preferences. "Knox, are you even listening?" His father, Kieran Daniels, who still sat on the board despite retiring as CEO 5 years ago, was staring at him with irritation. "Sorry. Yes, I think the expansion into the Asian market makes sense, but we need to ensure we have the infrastructure in place first." The meeting continued, but Knox could feel his father's eyes on him. After everyone else filed out, Kieran stayed behind. "What's going on with you?" his father demanded. "You've been distracted all week. This isn't like you." Knox leaned back in his chair. "I met someone." Kieran's expression softened slightly. "That's good. You work too much. When do I get to meet her?" "It's complicated, Dad." "How complicated?" Knox explained the situation, watching his father's expression grow increasingly concerned. "Son, you need to tell her immediately. The longer you wait, the worse this is going to be. What happens if someone recognizes you when you're out with her? What if she sees your picture in a business magazine? You're not exactly unknown." "I know. I'm going to tell her at dinner on Saturday, I promise." But Saturday brought its own complications. Knox arrived at the restaurant first, and as he was waiting for Whitney, he spotted someone he knew at a nearby table. Richard Chen, a business associate who definitely knew who Knox was and would absolutely come over to say hello if he saw him. Knox quickly texted Whitney, "Slight change of plans. Would you mind if we did takeout instead? There's a great park nearby with a beautiful view." Whitney's response came quickly. "That actually sounds perfect. Meet you outside the restaurant." Crisis averted, Knox thought with relief, even as he recognized he was being a coward. He got takeout orders for both of them and met Whitney outside. She was wearing a simple sundress, her hair loose around her shoulders, and Knox thought she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. They drove separately to the park, spreading out a blanket Knox had grabbed from his car. The evening was warm, the sun just starting to set, and the park overlooked the river that ran through the city. "This is perfect," Whitney said, settling onto the blanket. "Much better than sitting in a stuffy restaurant." They ate and talked, the conversation as easy as always. Whitney told him about her week, about the adoption events they had held at the shelter, about the elderly woman who had finally found a companion dog after months of looking. "You really love what you do," Knox observed. "I really do. Even on the hard days, even when we lose an animal or can't save one, I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Whitney looked at him seriously. "Do you feel that way about your work?" Knox thought about it. "Yes, actually, I do. There's a lot of pressure and stress, but at the end of the day, I know what we produce makes a real difference. We've helped save lives." "That's beautiful," Whitney said softly. She moved closer to him on the blanket, and Knox put his arm around her. They sat like that, watching the sun set over the river, and Knox felt a peace he hadn't experienced in years. "Knox," Whitney said after a while, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I'm really falling for you. Like, really falling. And it's scary because it's only been a week, but I can't help how I feel." She looked up at him, vulnerability written across her features. "Is that crazy?" "No," Knox said, his throat tight. "It's not crazy at all because I'm falling for you too." Whitney smiled and Knox leaned down to kiss her. It was their first kiss, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they pulled apart, Whitney was blushing. "I've been wanting to do that all week," she admitted. "Me too." Knox kissed her again, longer this time, and felt something click into place in his chest. This was real. What they had was real and important and worth protecting, which meant he absolutely had to tell her the truth. Tonight. Right now. "Whitney, I need to tell you something," Knox started, but his phone started buzzing insistently. He tried to ignore it, but it kept ringing. Finally, he pulled it out and saw Patricia's name. His assistant would never call him during personal time unless it was a genuine emergency. "I'm so sorry I have to take this," Knox said. "Of course," Whitney said, moving slightly away to give him privacy. Knox answered. "Patricia, what's wrong?" "Sir, I'm so sorry to bother you, but we have a serious problem. There's been an accident at the Ohio facility. No one was seriously hurt, but there's significant equipment damage and the local news is already picking up the story. We need you to make a statement." Knox closed his eyes. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and turned to Whitney. "I'm so sorry. There's been an emergency at work." "I have to go." Disappointment flickered across Whitney's face. "Is everything okay?" "It will be. I just need to handle something." Knox helped her pack up the remains of their dinner. "Can we do this again soon, maybe tomorrow?" "I'd like that." Whitney touched his face gently. "Go. Do what you need to do. Text me later." "I will." Knox kissed her once more before heading to his car. He drove to his office, his mind racing. The Ohio facility was crucial to their operations. And if the damage was as bad as Patricia suggested, they could be looking at production delays that would affect multiple hospitals. As soon as he walked into the building, still wearing his casual clothes from the park, his whole team descended on him with updates and questions. Knox spent the next 4 hours managing the crisis, coordinating with the Ohio facility manager, drafting statements for the press, arranging for equipment replacements, and ensuring their clients would not face delays in their orders. It was nearly midnight when things finally stabilized enough for him to leave. He texted Whitney as he drove home. "I'm so sorry about tonight. Crisis is handled now. I hope you got home okay." Her response came a few minutes later. "All good here. I'm glad your work thing is resolved. Get some rest." Knox fell into bed exhausted, but sleep wouldn't come. He kept thinking about Whitney's confession, about the kiss they had shared, about the fact that he still hadn't told her the truth. Lucas was right. His father was right. Kira was right. He was being a coward, and the longer he waited, the worse the betrayal would feel when she inevitably found out. On Sunday, Knox woke up determined to come clean. He texted Whitney and asked if he could come over that afternoon. She agreed, sending him her address. Her apartment was in an older building in a modest neighborhood. Knox climbed the stairs to the third floor and knocked on her door. Whitney answered wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair in a messy bun. "Sorry, I was cleaning," she said, letting him in. "The place is kind of a disaster." Knox looked around the small apartment. It was tidy despite her protests, decorated with thrift store furniture and photos of animals. There was a warmth to it, a personality that made it feel like a home despite its size. "I like it," Knox said honestly. "It feels like you," Whitney smiled. "Can I get you something to drink? I have water, coffee, or orange juice. That's pretty much the extent of my beverage options." "Water's fine." Knox sat on her couch while she got drinks from the kitchen. When she returned, he patted the seat next to him. "Come here, we need to talk." Whitney's expression grew concerned. "That sounds ominous." "It's not, I promise." "Well, maybe a little." Knox took a deep breath. "Whitney, I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am and what I do." She tensed slightly. "What do you mean?" "When I told you I work in manufacturing, that was true, but I left out some important details. I don't just work in manufacturing. I own the company. It's called Daniels Global Manufacturing, and we produce medical equipment for hospitals worldwide." Whitney stared at him. "You own the company?" "Yes. And it's a very large company. $1 billion revenue, facilities in multiple countries, thousands of employees." Knox forced himself to meet her eyes. "I'm the CEO and majority shareholder. I'm the exact kind of rich guy you said you didn't want to date." The silence stretched between them, and Knox watched emotions flicker across Whitney's face. Confusion, hurt, and then anger. "How long were you planning to keep this from me?" Her voice was quiet but sharp. "I wasn't trying to keep it from you. I mean, I was, but not because I wanted to lie. That first night at Murphy's, I heard you talking to your friend about not dating wealthy men, and then when you came over to talk to me, you treated me like a normal person. Do you know how rare that is? How long it's been since someone wanted to know me for me, not for my money or what I could do for them, so you lied." "I didn't lie. I just didn't correct your assumptions." Even as he said it, Knox knew how weak it sounded. Whitney stood up, pacing her small living room. "That's the same thing, Knox. You let me believe you were someone you're not. I told you about my past, about why I don't date rich guys, and you just sat there and let me talk, knowing the whole time that you were exactly the kind of person I was trying to avoid. I'm not like those other guys, Whitney. I'm not Marcus with the country club membership or the investment banker who ignored you. I care about you. These past 2 weeks, getting to know you, it's been the best thing that's happened to me in years. But it wasn't real, was it? You were playing pretend, slumming it with the poor vet tech who doesn't know any better." Whitney's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "That's not fair, and you know it. My feelings for you are completely real. The conversations we've had, the connection between us, none of that was fake. But the foundation was. You built everything on a lie." Whitney wrapped her arms around herself. "I need you to leave." Knox stood up, his heart breaking. "Please, Whitney, give me a chance to explain properly. Let me show you that I'm still the same person you've been getting to know." "Are you, though? Because the Knox I was falling for would never deceive someone like this. The real Knox, the billionaire CEO, I don't know him at all." She walked to the door and opened it. "Please go." Knox wanted to argue, to fight for what they had, but he could see that Whitney needed space. "I'll go. But Whitney, I meant everything I said to you, every word, and I'm not giving up on us." He left, the door closing firmly behind him. Knox sat in his car for a long moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel before finally driving away. He had known this could happen, had been warned repeatedly that his deception would backfire, and yet he had continued anyway. And now he had hurt the one person he was trying to protect. Over the next week, Knox tried to give Whitney space while also making it clear he wasn't disappearing. He sent flowers to the shelter with a card that read, "I'm sorry. The Knox you know is the real me, I promise." He texted her once a day, simple messages that didn't demand a response. "Thinking of you. I hope you're doing well. I miss you." Whitney didn't respond to any of them. Knox threw himself into work, but his heart wasn't in it. Patricia noticed, his management team noticed, even his father called to check on him. "She won't talk to me," Knox admitted during that call. "I screwed up, Dad, you were right. I should have told her from the beginning." "Give her time," Kieran said, surprisingly gentle. "If she really cares about you, she'll come around, and if she doesn't, then maybe it wasn't meant to be." But Knox couldn't accept that. He knew what he felt for Whitney was special, rare, worth fighting for. He just had to figure out how to prove to her that he was worth a second chance. The answer came from an unexpected source. Knox was working late at the office when Patricia buzzed his intercom. "Sir, there's a Sarah Mitchell here to see you. She says she's a friend of Whitney Harper's and that it's urgent." Knox sat up straight. "Send her in." Sarah walked into his office a moment later, and Knox recognized her from the bar. She looked him up and down, taking in the expensive office, the view of the city, the obvious trappings of wealth. "So you're the famous Knox," she said, settling into the chair across from his desk without being invited. "Whitney told me what happened. Then you know I messed up." "Oh, you more than messed up. You broke her heart." Sarah leaned forward. "But here's the thing. I've known Whitney for 10 years, and I've never seen her as happy as she was when she talked about you. She was falling hard and fast, and that scared her even before she found out about your little deception. I wasn't trying to deceive her. I just wanted a chance for her to know me without all of this." Knox gestured around the office, "Without the money and the status getting in the way." "I get that. I really do. And honestly, if you were just some rich jerk looking for a fling, I'd tell you to leave her alone and never contact her again. But I don't think that's what you are. So I'm going to tell you something that might help." Knox leaned forward. "I'm listening." "The shelter where Whitney works is in serious financial trouble. They're about to lose their funding, and if they can't find a major donor or grant in the next month, they'll have to close. Whitney is devastated. She's been working overtime trying to organize fundraisers, reaching out to everyone she knows, but it's not enough. How much do they need?" Sarah named a figure that was substantial for a non-profit but relatively minor compared to Knox's wealth. His mind was already racing with possibilities. "Thank you for telling me this," Knox said. "But Sarah, if I help, it has to be because it's the right thing to do, not as some kind of bribe to win Whitney back. I know. That's why I'm here. Because I think you actually care about what matters to her, not just about getting her back." Sarah stood up. "But Knox, if you do this, don't make a big production of it. Don't slap your name all over it or demand recognition. Just help because you can." After Sarah left, Knox sat at his desk for a long time thinking. He could write a check that would save the shelter, but that felt too easy, too much like trying to buy Whitney's forgiveness. Instead, he started researching, learning everything he could about the Harbor View Animal Shelter, its mission, its struggles, its needs. 3 days later, Knox called the shelter's director, a woman named Margaret Chen, and asked for a meeting. He introduced himself as a potential donor interested in animal welfare, nothing more. Margaret was a tiny woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and an obvious passion for her work. She walked Knox through the shelter, showing him the facilities, introducing him to the animals, explaining their programs with pride despite the financial uncertainty hanging over them. "We serve over 300 animals a year," Margaret said as they stood in the main kennel area. "And we never turn anyone away, even when we're at capacity. But that's part of our problem. We take in animals that other shelters won't, the ones who are sick or traumatized or old, and that's expensive." What would it take to keep the shelter running long-term? Knox asked. Not just a band-aid solution, but actual sustainability. Margaret pulled out a folder filled with budget projections and program proposals. For the next hour, they discussed the shelter's needs, both immediate and long-term. Knox asked questions, took notes, and felt his respect for Margaret and her team growing. "I want to help," Knox finally said, "but I don't want recognition or my name on anything. I want to set up a trust that will provide stable funding for the shelter going forward, as well as cover the immediate financial crisis. Can we make that work?" Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "Are you serious?" "Completely serious. My lawyer will draw up the paperwork. I'll need your accountant's contact information and a detailed budget breakdown, but we can have funding in place within 2 weeks." "Why?" Margaret asked. "Why would you do this?" Knox thought about Whitney, about her passion for helping animals, about the light in her eyes when she talked about her work. "Because what you do here matters. Because animals deserve advocates. And because someone I care about deeply would be heartbroken if this place closed." He left the shelter feeling better than he had in days. This wasn't about winning Whitney back, though he desperately hoped it might help. This was about supporting something that mattered to her, about putting his money towards something meaningful. But he didn't tell Whitney what he had done. He wanted her to hear it from the shelter, to let it be a victory for her and her team without his presence complicating things. A week later, Whitney finally responded to one of his texts. "The shelter got a huge donation. We're saved." "I don't know if you had anything to do with it, but if you did, thank you." Knox's heart leaped. "Can I see you, just to talk?" The reply came after a long pause. "Okay, coffee shop tomorrow at 3. Knox arrived at Brood Awakening 15 minutes early, his heart pounding. When Whitney walked in, he stood up automatically. She looked tired, with circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't been sleeping well. "Hi," she said, sitting down across from him. "Hi, thank you for agreeing to meet with me." They ordered coffee in awkward silence, so different from the easy conversation they had shared before. When they were seated again, Whitney spoke first. "Did you fund the donation? The one that saved the shelter?" Knox met her eyes. "I set up a trust that will provide ongoing funding, yes. But I did it anonymously, and I did it because what you do there matters, not as a way to manipulate you into forgiving me." Whitney was quiet for a moment. "I believe you. Sarah told me about your meeting with Margaret, about how you spent time learning about the shelter and its needs instead of just writing a check. That meant something. I'm glad. But Whitney, I need you to know that I would have done it regardless of what happened between us." "Well, I wouldn't have known about the shelter's situation, but the point is, I didn't do it to win you back." "Then why did you do it?" "Because you love that place. Because the work you do is important. Because I have the resources to help, and it would be wrong not to use them for something good." Knox reached across the table, stopping just short of taking her hand. "But mostly because in the short time I've known you, you've made me want to be a better person. You've reminded me why I built my company in the first place, why it matters, and I wanted to honor that." Tears slipped down Whitney's cheeks. "I was so angry at you. I felt betrayed and stupid for not figuring it out." "You weren't stupid. I was deliberately hiding who I was because I was scared. Scared that you'd only see the money. Scared that you'd put me in the same category as those jerks you dated before. Scared that I'd lose my chance with you before I even really got one." Knox finally took her hand. "But I should have trusted you with the truth from the beginning. I should have given you the choice. And I'm sorry I didn't." Whitney squeezed his hand. "I wasn't entirely fair either. I judged you based on your bank account before I knew anything else about you. That's not right. You're not defined by your wealth any more than I'm defined by my lack of it." "So where does that leave us?" Knox asked, hardly daring to hope. "I don't know," Whitney admitted. "I'm still hurt. I'm still processing, but I also really miss you. I miss our conversations and the way you make me laugh. I miss feeling like someone really sees me." "I do see you, Whitney." I see how compassionate you are, how dedicated, how you light up when you talk about the animals you help. I see your strength and your kindness. And none of that has anything to do with money or status. Can we start over? Whitney asked. Not all the way, but maybe from a more honest place. I want to know the real Knox, all of him, including the billionaire CEO part. Relief flooded through Knox. I would like that more than anything. But fair warning, my world can be intense. There are business dinners and galas and a lot of pressure. I won't lie and say it's easy. And my world involves early mornings cleaning kennels and dogs that throw up on my shoes. Think you can handle that? Whitney asked with a small smile. I think I can handle anything as long as you're in it. Knox stood up and moved to sit next to her, pulling her into a gentle hug. Thank you for giving me another chance. Over the next few weeks, Knox and Whitney rebuilt their relationship on a foundation of honesty. Knox introduced her to his world gradually. First, a dinner at a nice restaurant where he let her see the kind of attention his presence drew. Whitney handled it better than he expected, staying grounded and herself despite the fancier surroundings. Then he invited her to his penthouse. Whitney's eyes went wide when she saw the sprawling space with its panoramic views. Okay, this is definitely a lot, she admitted, walking to the windows. But it's still just a place, right? It doesn't change who you are. That's exactly right, Knox said, coming to stand behind her. It's nice and I'm grateful for it, but it's not what defines me. Whitney turned to face him. So what does define you? The same things that defined me when you thought I was just a project manager. My values, my work, the people I care about. You. He kissed her softly. Definitely you. Knox also made an effort to become part of Whitney's world. He started volunteering at the shelter on weekends, mucking out kennels and walking dogs alongside Whitney. At first, the other volunteers were star-struck when they recognized him, but his genuine interest and willingness to do unglamorous work won them over quickly. You're actually pretty good at this, Whitney said one Saturday as Knox successfully coaxed a Shy Terrier mix into eating from his hand. Have you ever thought about giving up the CEO thing and becoming a full-time dog walker? The pay cut might be a bit steep, Knox joked. But honestly, this is the most relaxed I've felt in months. Margaret pulled Knox aside before he left that day. You know, when you first came here, I wondered if you were one of those wealthy donors who wants to feel good about themselves without actually getting their hands dirty. But you're not. You genuinely care. Whitney makes me want to be better, Knox said simply. And this place, what you all do here, it matters. How could I not care? 2 months into their renewed relationship, Knox invited Whitney to be his date for a charity gala. It would be her first real introduction to his social world, and he could tell she was nervous. What if I say the wrong thing? What if I use the wrong fork? Whitney asked as they got ready in Knox's penthouse. He had insisted on buying her a dress for the occasion, and after some argument she had agreed, letting him take her to a boutique where they found a stunning navy gown that made her eyes shine. You'll be perfect, Knox assured her, adjusting his bow tie. Just be yourself. That's all I want, and honestly, that's all anyone worth knowing will care about. The gala was held at the city's most prestigious hotel, and as they walked in, Knox felt Whitney's hand tighten on his arm. Heads turned, people whispered, and Knox knew the gossip mill was already churning about his mystery date. Knox introduced Whitney to colleagues, business associates, and society figures throughout the evening. She was poised and gracious, asking genuine questions and showing real interest in people's responses. Knox watched her charm a difficult investor with questions about his grandchildren and impress a potential client with her knowledge of supply chain issues in nonprofit management. Where did you find her? Kira whispered to Knox during a quiet moment. And more importantly, can she teach me how to make Marcus Wellborn actually smile? I've been trying for years. She's special, Knox said, watching Whitney laugh at something his father was telling her across the room. Really special. Later, as they danced, Whitney looked up at him with a mixture of amusement and exhaustion. "Your world is a lot," she admitted, "but I think I'm getting the hang of it. You were incredible tonight. I'm so proud of you." "I'm proud of me too," Whitney said. "I didn't trip once in these heels, and I remembered which fork to use for each course." Knox laughed. "That's my girl, always focused on what's important." As the evening wound down, they stepped out onto a balcony overlooking the city. The night air was cool, and Knox wrapped his jacket around Whitney's shoulders. "Thank you for tonight," he said, "for being willing to step into my world even though I know it's not always comfortable." "Thank you for stepping into mine," Whitney countered. "For showing up at the shelter every weekend, for caring about what I care about. That means more to me than any fancy party." Knox pulled her close. "I love you, Whitney. I should have said it before, but I was scared. Scared of moving too fast, scared of scaring you away. But life's too short not to say what you feel. I love you." Whitney's eyes shone with tears. "I love you too, even when you're being an idiot billionaire who lies about his identity." "I promise no more lies. Ever. You know everything now, I know, and I love all of it." The CEO who runs a billion-dollar company, and the guy who sits on the floor of the shelter trying to coax a scared dog out from under a table. All of you. They kissed under the stars, the sounds of the party fading away until it was just the two of them, together in the moment. 6 months later, Knox and Whitney had found a rhythm that worked for them. Whitney still lived in her small apartment, though Knox had offered multiple times to help her find something bigger. She had accepted some help, letting him pay off her student loans as a birthday gift, but she maintained her independence in ways that Knox respected and admired. Knox had scaled back his work hours, delegating more to his senior management team and actually taking weekends off. He spent that time at the shelter with Whitney or exploring the city together, finding hole-in-the-wall restaurants and hidden parks. They had their challenges. There were times when Knox's schedule conflicted with Whitney's plans, when business emergencies pulled him away at inconvenient moments. There were times when Whitney felt overwhelmed by the attention that came with dating a billionaire, when paparazzi showed up at the shelter or gossip magazines speculated about their relationship. But they worked through it, talking honestly about their feelings, supporting each other through the hard moments. Knox learned to be more present, to turn off his phone during their time together. Whitney learned to accept help when she needed it, to let Knox share his resources with causes she cared about. One Saturday evening, Knox picked Whitney up from work with a mysterious smile on his face. "Where are we going?" she asked, noting that he was heading out of the city. "You'll see." "Trust me, always." They drove for about an hour, finally pulling up to a property on the outskirts of the city. It was a sprawling piece of land, mostly grass and trees, with a small barn and a farmhouse that had seen better days. "What is this place?" Whitney asked as they got out of the car. "It's for sale. 20 acres, good bones on the buildings, and completely private." Knox took her hand, leading her around the property. "I was thinking it could be perfect for that sanctuary you talked about, the one for special needs animals." Whitney stopped walking, staring at him. "Knox, this must cost a fortune." "That's not the point. The point is, you've been dreaming about opening a sanctuary for as long as I've known you. Here's your chance. We could renovate the barn into proper facilities, fix up the house for an on-site caretaker, create specialized enclosures. Make your dream real." "We," Whitney repeated. Knox realized what he had said and decided to go with it. He had been planning to wait to make the moment perfect, but standing here with Whitney, watching her eyes shine as she imagined the possibilities, felt right. He pulled a small box from his pocket and dropped to one knee. "Whitney Harper, you walked into my life at a bar 2 years ago and changed everything. You made me remember what matters, made me want to be better, made me believe in real connection again. You see me, not my bank account or my company, just me. And I love you more than I thought it was possible to love another person." Whitney's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. "I want to build this sanctuary with you. I want to build a life with you. I want to wake up every morning knowing I get to spend another day loving you. Whitney, will you marry me?" "Yes," Whitney said, her voice breaking. "Yes, absolutely yes." Knox slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple platinum band with a single diamond, elegant but not ostentatious. He had spent weeks choosing it, wanting something that suited Whitney's style. They kissed there in the middle of what would become their sanctuary, the sun setting behind them, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I can't believe this is real," Whitney said, looking at the ring on her finger, then back at the property. "A year ago, I was saying I'd never date a rich guy, and now I'm engaged to one and planning a sanctuary." "Life's funny that way," Knox said, pulling her close. "But for the record, you didn't fall in love with a rich guy. You fell in love with me. The money is just incidental." "That's true. Though I have to admit, the money does make the sanctuary dream a lot more feasible. That's what money should be for. Making dreams possible, helping people, creating something meaningful. Otherwise, what's the point?" They spent another hour walking the property, planning and dreaming together. Whitney pointed out where different enclosures could go, where they could build a medical facility, where the gardens could be planted. Knox took notes on his phone, already thinking about architects and contractors, about how to make Whitney's vision a reality. The wedding took place 8 months later in a ceremony that perfectly blended their two worlds. They got married at the sanctuary property, which was still under construction, but far enough along to be beautiful. The guest list included Knox's business associates and family members alongside Whitney's friends from the shelter and her small-town family. Whitney wore a simple lace dress that made her look like she had stepped out of a fairy tale. Knox couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle, her father beaming with pride beside her. They exchanged vows they had written themselves. Whitney promised to love Knox in all his complexity, to support his dreams while keeping him grounded, to be his partner in building a life of meaning and purpose. Knox promised to always see Whitney for who she truly was, to support her passions, to be honest and present, to build a life worthy of her love. "I never believed in fairy tales," Whitney said as they danced their first dance as husband and wife. "But this feels pretty close." "It's better than a fairy tale," Knox said, "because it's real. The struggles and challenges and hard work that got us here, that makes it mean something. Look at us," Whitney laughed. "The vet tech who didn't do rich guys and the billionaire who was tired of being valued for his money." "Who would have thought?" "I would have," Knox said seriously. "From that first night at Murphy's bar when you were loudly declaring you'd never date someone like me, I knew you were special. I knew you were worth the risk. Even when I was being completely unfair and prejudiced. Even then. Because underneath it, I understood what you really wanted. Someone real, someone who saw you, someone who valued the things that matter, and I wanted the same thing." The sanctuary opened a year after their wedding, a state-of-the-art facility dedicated to caring for animals that other shelters couldn't or wouldn't take. Whitney served as the director, her background as a vet tech combined with the management skills she had learned helping Knox understand the business side of nonprofit work. Knox sat on the board and frequently rolled up his sleeves to help with the hands-on work. They hired a staff of dedicated professionals, but Knox and Whitney were there most days, working alongside their team. The sanctuary became known for its innovative programs, its commitment to giving every animal a chance, and the obvious love that went into every aspect of its operation. 2 years into their marriage, Whitney discovered she was pregnant. They were sitting in the sanctuary's office, reviewing adoption applications, when she suddenly went pale and ran to the bathroom. Knox followed her, concerned, and found her sitting on the floor, a pregnancy test in her hand. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice a mixture of shock and joy. We're going to have a baby." Knox sank down beside her, his own emotions overwhelming. "Really? We're really having a baby? Unless this test is lying, yes." Whitney showed him the clear positive result. They sat there on the bathroom floor, holding each other and crying happy tears, until one of their staff members knocked on the door to ask if everything was okay. The pregnancy was relatively easy, and Whitney continued working at the sanctuary until her 8th month, when Knox finally convinced her to take it easier. Their daughter was born on a beautiful spring morning, a healthy baby girl with Whitney's hazel eyes and Knox's dark hair. They named her Clara Marie Daniels, and from the moment Knox held her, he knew his life had just become infinitely richer in ways that had nothing to do with money. "She's perfect," Whitney whispered from the hospital bed, watching Knox cradle their daughter with a gentleness that made her heart ache. "She's ours," Knox said with wonder. "We made this perfect little person." Clara grew up surrounded by love and animals, spending her days at the sanctuary with her parents. She learned to walk by holding onto the fence of the goat enclosure, spoke her first words to a patient therapy dog, and showed the same compassion for animals that Whitney had. On Clara's 3rd birthday, Knox and Whitney stood in the sanctuary watching their daughter carefully feed carrots to the rescue horses, a gaggle of friends around her celebrating with a barn party that was pure joy. "You ever think about that night at Murphy's bar?" Whitney asked, leaning against Knox. "About how you overheard me ranting about rich guys and came over anyway. All the time," Knox admitted. "Best decision I ever made, even if I screwed it up initially." "You didn't screw it up. You gave us a chance to know each other without all the complications. And yeah, you should have told me the truth sooner, but I understand why you did it." Whitney kissed him softly. "We found our way to each other, and that's what matters. I love you, Whitney Daniels. Thank you for taking a chance on this rich guy. I love you too. And for the record, you're not a rich guy. You're my guy who just happens to be rich. There's a difference." They watched Clara laugh as a goat tried to eat the birthday crown off her head, surrounded by friends and family, by the animals they had saved, and the sanctuary they had built together. Knox thought about the journey that had brought them here, from a dive bar where he had been trying to hide his identity to this moment of pure happiness. He thought about the risks they had both taken, the trust they had built, the love that had grown between them despite the obstacles. "What are you thinking about?" Whitney asked, always attuned to his moods. "About how lucky I am. About how none of the money or success or anything I built professionally compares to this. To you, to Clara, to the life we've created." "That's because this is what actually matters," Whitney said. "The love, the family, the meaningful work, the rest is just details. Important details sometimes," Knox teased. "Those details are paying for this party and the sanctuary and our daughter's college fund. Fine, useful details, but still just details." Whitney took his hand. "The real wealth is right here, in moments like this." As the sun set over the sanctuary, painting everything in golden light, Knox pulled his wife close and kissed her. Around them, children played, animals wandered peacefully, and their daughter's laughter rang out clear and bright. This was everything Knox had never known he wanted when he walked into Murphy's bar that night 2 years ago. This was the life that Whitney's initial rejection of rich guys had almost prevented, but that her willingness to see the real person beneath the bank account had made possible. They had built something extraordinary together, not just the sanctuary, but a partnership based on honesty, respect, and genuine love. They had overcome their differences, learned from their mistakes, and created a family that honored both of their values. Years later, when people asked Whitney what changed her mind about dating a billionaire, she always smiled and said the same thing. "He made me realize that who someone is matters more than what they have, and he was worth taking that chance on." And when people asked Knox how he convinced a woman who hated rich guys to marry him, he simply said, I showed her that I was more than my bank account, that I could be a partner, not just a provider, and I loved her exactly as she was, which turned out to be exactly what we both needed. Their love story became something of a legend among their friends and family. The tale of the vet tech who declared she didn't do rich guys and the billionaire who heard her and pursued her anyway, building a relationship based on truth, respect, and a shared commitment to making the world a little bit better. And every year on their anniversary, Knox took Whitney back to Murphy's bar, where they sat in the same spot where they had first talked, toasting to the journey that had brought them together and the life they continued to build side by side. The billionaire and the woman who didn't do rich guys, who found in each other exactly what they had been looking for all along: real love, honest partnership, and a shared vision of a life well lived.